Let's start with the most scientifically grounded hypothesis, the Cro-Magnon theory. Around 45,000 years ago, a group of humans entered Europe. We call them Cro-Magnons, though that's really just an archaeological label for the first anatomically modern humans in Europe. These weren't Neanderthals. Those had been there for hundreds of thousands of years, perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions. These were newcomers, migrants from Africa and the Middle East, carrying with them all the innovations that modern humans had developed. Advanced stone tools, sophisticated hunting techniques, art, music, symbolic thinking. When they arrived, Europe was already occupied. The Neanderthals had been living there successfully for over 200,000 years. They were robust, powerful, perfectly suited to the cold climate. They had their own culture, their own technologies, their own social systems. The two species coexisted for thousands of years. We know this because we can trace it in the archaeological record. Neanderthal sites and Cro-Magnon sites existing side by side, sometimes within a few miles of each other. And we know they interbred. Genetic analysis has proven this beyond doubt. Modern Europeans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. The mixing happened multiple times in multiple places over thousands of years. But here's where it gets interesting. Some researchers have suggested that Rh- might be one of the genetic legacies of that ancient interbreeding. A marker that emerged in those early European populations, either from Neanderthal genes or from the unique selective pressures that Cro-Magnons faced adapting to European environments. The evidence is circumstantial but intriguing. Rh- reaches its highest frequencies in the Basque region of Spain and France, areas that also show unusual genetic isolation and deep ancestral roots. Some studies have suggested the Basques represent one of the most genetically ancient populations in Europe, possibly direct descendants of those first Cro-Magnon settlers with minimal mixing from later migrations. If Rh- emerged in those early European populations, the Basques might have preserved it at high frequencies simply because they remained relatively isolated for thousands of years. But the Cro-Magnon hypothesis, reasonable as it sounds, doesn't explain everything. Why would a trait that creates pregnancy complications persist at such high frequencies? Natural selection should have eliminated it, or at least reduced it to rare mutation status, unless it provided some advantage, some benefit that outweighed the reproductive costs. Which brings us to theories that venture further from mainstream science. One of the most persistent involves Atlantis. Yes, that Atlantis. The legendary advanced civilization described by Plato, supposedly destroyed in a single catastrophic day and night. Now, most historians consider Atlantis either pure fiction or a philosophical allegory. But that hasn't stopped theorists from connecting it to Rh- blood. The logic goes like this. If Atlantis existed and was destroyed around 11,000 years ago, as Plato claimed, the survivors would have dispersed to other lands. Some theorists point to the Basque region, to Ireland, to parts of North Africa as possible refuge sites. Places where Atlantean survivors might have settled, intermarried with local populations, and passed on their genetics, including perhaps an unusual blood type that had been common in their lost homeland. There's no archaeological evidence for any of this. No sunken cities with advanced technology. No genetic markers that can be traced to a single catastrophic diaspora 11,000 years ago. But the theory persists because it offers something the mainstream explanation doesn't: a narrative. A story that makes Rh- blood feel special, connected to something greater than random mutation. Then there's the ancient astronaut theory. This one pushes the boundaries of speculation even further. The basic premise: at some point in human prehistory, extraterrestrial beings visited Earth and interbred with humans. The offspring of these unions carried genetic markers that distinguished them from purely terrestrial humans. Rh- blood, according to this theory, is one of those markers. Proponents point to ancient texts that describe gods coming down from the sky and mating with human women. They reference the unusual properties of Rh-negative blood, the pregnancy complications, the claimed differences in physiology and psychology. They ask, why would evolution create a blood type that causes problems unless it wasn't evolution? Unless it was introduced from outside? Mainstream science dismisses this entirely. There's no physical evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact. The pregnancy complications associated with Rh-negative can be explained through normal evolutionary mechanisms. The clustering patterns match what we'd expect from population genetics and migration patterns. But dismissal hasn't killed the theory. It remains one of the most popular explanations in alternative research circles. The pregnancy paradox. But carrying this rare blood came with a price. A price that wouldn't become clear until a woman with Rh-negative blood decided to have children. Here's where the story gets dark. Here's where evolution seems to have made a mistake so fundamental that it should have eliminated Rh-negative blood from the human population entirely. Because under the right circumstances, or rather the wrong ones, an Rh-negative mother's immune system could kill her own baby. It works like this. Imagine a woman with Rh-negative blood. O-negative, A-negative, doesn't matter which type, as long as she lacks that Rh protein on her red blood cells. She meets a man, falls in love, gets pregnant. And if that man happens to be Rh positive, which statistically he probably is since 85% of people are, then the baby has a good chance of inheriting his Rh positive blood. Now you've got an Rh-negative mother carrying an Rh positive baby. For the first pregnancy, things usually go fine. The mother's immune system doesn't know about the baby's different blood type. The placenta does a remarkably good job of keeping maternal and fetal blood separate. It's like two separate circulation systems running side by side, exchanging oxygen and nutrients through cellular barriers, but never actually mixing. Usually. But during childbirth, those barriers break down. The placenta separates from the uterine wall. Small amounts of the baby's blood enter the mother's circulation. And for the first time, the mother's immune system encounters those foreign Rh proteins on her baby's red blood cells. Her immune system does what immune systems do. It recognizes a foreign invader and mounts a response. It creates antibodies, specialized proteins designed to attack and destroy anything carrying that Rh marker. The first baby is usually born healthy, completely unaffected. But the mother has been sensitized. Her immune system now has a memory of that foreign protein. It's ready. Then she gets pregnant again. Another Rh positive baby. And this time those antibodies are waiting. They're small enough to cross the placenta. Small enough to enter the baby's circulation. And once they're in there, they start attacking the baby's red blood cells, binding to those Rh proteins, and marking the cells for destruction. The medical term is hemolytic disease of the newborn. The simple translation: the mother's immune system is destroying her baby's blood while the baby is still in the womb. The baby's body tries to compensate. It produces more and more red blood cells, working desperately to replace the ones being destroyed. But it can't keep up. The baby becomes profoundly anemic. The heart enlarges, trying to pump harder to deliver oxygen with fewer red blood cells. Fluid accumulates in body cavities. The liver and spleen swell as they work overtime trying to produce replacement blood cells. In severe cases, babies were born swollen, pale, barely alive. Many died within hours or days. Others survived but suffered permanent brain damage from the lack of oxygen during critical developmental periods. Some mothers watched baby after baby die, never understanding why their bodies kept betraying them. Before 1968, doctors could only watch. They understood the mechanism. They could predict which pregnancies were at risk. But they had no way to prevent the sensitization, no way to stop a mother's immune system from attacking her own children. The grief was unfathomable. Then came 1968. Two scientists, Vincent Frieda and John Gorman in New York, and William Pollack in Liverpool, working independently, developed a treatment. They called it Rh immunoglobulin. We know it now as Rogum. The concept was elegantly simple. If you could prevent the mother's immune system from ever recognizing those Rh-positive blood cells during the first pregnancy, you could prevent sensitization. No sensitization, no antibodies. No antibodies, no attacks on subsequent babies. Rogum is essentially a dose of primate antibodies against the Rh protein, given to an Rh-negative mother shortly after delivery of an Rh-positive baby. The first cluster of claims is physical. More often than not, you'll hear that Rh-negatives tend to have lower blood pressure, lower resting body temperature, heightened sensitivity to pain, unusual reactions to heat or cold, and a kind of oversensitivity to bright light or direct sunlight. Some people describe walking into the sun and feeling almost overwhelmed, as if their skin and eyes are amplifying the light rather than filtering it. In online communities, these shared experiences become patterns. Patterns become narratives. Before long, the story congeals. Rh-negatives are physically different, more delicate in some ways, more tuned in others. There is a kernel of reality in some of this. A few small studies have suggested that on average, people with Rh-negative blood might have slightly lower blood pressure than Rh-positives. The differences are modest, and not all studies agree, but the idea is not entirely invented. Then there are the claims about unusual eye colors. Scroll through Rh-negative forums, and you'll see it repeated like a mantra. We have hazel eyes, green eyes, eyes that change color. We don't fit standard categories. Genetically, eye color is controlled by multiple genes, many of which are common in the very European and North African populations that also show high Rh-negative frequencies. So the link between Rh-negative and lighter, mixed eye colors exists statistically in some groups, but it's a side effect of shared ancestry, not of the Rh factor itself. Still, when you look in the mirror and see unusual eyes staring back, and you also know you belong to a rare blood group, it's hard not to weave them together into a single story. Then there is intelligence. Many Rh-negative people report being told they are gifted, that they read early, that they think in unconventional ways. This is a powerful idea. The thought that your blood type secretly encodes a sharper mind can be flattering, reassuring, even comforting if you've always felt out of step with those around you. But when researchers look carefully at large populations, controlling for education, socioeconomic status, and region, the alleged IQ gap largely dissolves. Any differences are small, inconsistent, and rarely rise above statistical noise. Intelligence is complex. It's shaped by genes, yes, but also nutrition, childhood environment, schooling, health, even luck. There is no robust scientific evidence that the simple presence or absence of one antigen on red blood cells makes you meaningfully smarter. And yet the myth persists. Not because it's been rigorously demonstrated, but because it speaks to a feeling many Rh-negative people already have, that they think differently, feel differently, and are searching for an explanation. From here, the claims start to leave biology entirely. One of the strangest myths is the reptilian body temperature idea. In this story, Rh-negative individuals are said to run colder, like reptiles, or to be less able to regulate their temperature. Some tie this to ancient alien or non-human ancestry, blending conspiracy theories with pop culture references until the original idea is almost unrecognizable. Calling Rh-negative bodies reptilian is less about temperature and more about storytelling. It paints them as otherworldly, different not just in degree but in kind. And once the door to the otherworldly is open, more claims enter. Psychic sensitivity, telepathy, stronger empathic perception, a sense of knowing things before they happen, an uncanny knack for sensing danger or reading people. On their own, these experiences are not unique to Rh negatives. People of every blood type and every culture have stories of intuition, déjà vu, prophetic dreams. Our brains are pattern detecting machines. They log thousands of impressions every day, many beneath conscious awareness. When a few of those impressions line up with later events, the moment feels magical. But if before that moment you've already been told you're different, that your blood is rare, that your body runs on unusual settings, then every intuitive hit becomes evidence. Proof that the stories might be true. So what does science actually say about Rh negatives and psychic ability? So far, nothing solid. No controlled, replicable studies have shown enhanced extrasensory perception tied to the Rh factor. Blood type and identity. Picture a quiet office in Tokyo. Fluorescent lights humming softly, the click of keyboards, the low murmur of voices. It's a perfectly ordinary workplace until the manager, during a team-building session, casually asks everyone to write their blood type on a name tag. Nobody flinches. Nobody thinks it's strange. For many people in Japan, that tiny detail, A, B, O, or AB, isn't just a medical note. It's a personality profile, a hint about whether you're steady or impulsive, shy or outgoing, a good team player or a loose cannon. This is blood type personality theory. According to this system, people with type A blood are supposed to be earnest, organized, considerate. Type B are said to be creative, individualistic, sometimes selfish. Type O are painted as confident, natural leaders. Type AB are mysterious, complex, a mix of extremes. Walk into a bookstore in Japan and you can find blood type compatibility guides, blood type diet books, blood type parenting manuals. Television shows joke about celebrity blood types. And here's the fascinating part. Underneath all of that, they're talking almost entirely about the ABO system, not the Rh factor. The focus is on A, B, O, and AB, the surface markers on red blood cells first classified in the early 1900s. The plus or minus that tells you whether you're Rh positive or Rh negative rarely enters the story. To someone fascinated with Rh negative blood in the West, this can feel almost upside down. In many English-language conspiracy forums or fringe science books, the ABO groups are just background. The real mystery, the alleged alien gene or ancient bloodline, is often pinned on Rh negative status. Not A or AB, but the minus sign. Two cultures staring at the same blood and choosing completely different places to hang their myths. In Japan, the blood type personality system has roots in early 20th century pseudoscience. A 1920s-era researcher tried to link blood type with racial character, echoing dangerous ideas that were circulating in Europe at the time. Those early theories were discredited after the war, but the notion lingered in pop culture, slowly mutating from politics into entertainment, from ideology into icebreaker. But ideas, even playful ones, have consequences. In Japanese, there's a word, burahara, short for blood harassment. It describes discrimination based on blood type. The colleague who doesn't get put in charge of a project because type Bs can't be trusted with details. The child who's teased at school for being too serious, just like an A. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a different story is being told. In many Western countries, especially in online niches, interest in blood and personality takes a more specific turn. It doesn't stop at ABO types. It dives into Rh negative. Here, Rh negative is sometimes portrayed not as a simple variant, but as a hint of something extraordinary. People claim that Rh negative individuals are more intuitive, more empathetic, more independent, more prone to vivid dreams, more resistant to certain diseases, more likely to feel like outsiders. This is not the Japan-style personality typology with neat categories for A, B, O, and AB. It's something closer to a myth of chosenness. Not everyone has Rh-negative blood. In some populations, it's very rare. That rarity becomes a canvas. If you're one of the few, you might feel like you've discovered a secret identity, a hidden badge you've carried your whole life without knowing it. The medical reality. Fast forward from Ice Age river valleys and vanished human cousins to something utterly modern. Fluorescent hospital lights, plastic tubing, the quiet, urgent ballet of an emergency room at 3 a.m. A paramedic bursts through the door with a patient on a stretcher. Car crash. Massive blood loss. The clock is ticking in minutes, maybe seconds. Before anyone knows this person's name, before their medical history, before their story, the staff needs to know one thing. What kind of blood can we safely put into their veins? This is where Rh-negative blood quietly steps out of the shadows of genetic mystery and becomes something else, a medical lifeline. In a crisis, you can't wait for the lab to run a full cross match. You need a blood type that will almost never trigger a deadly reaction. For decades, that break glass in case of emergency blood has been O-negative. In many hospitals, if you walk into the blood bank, you'll see one shelf treated almost like gold, labeled in bold letters, carefully inventoried. That's the O-negative stock. Because in the high-speed triage logic of modern medicine, O-negative is as close as we get to a universal key. But the story is more complicated than the slogan you might have heard in a high school biology class. The universal donor myth makes it sound simple. O-negative goes into anyone, everyone, no problem. The reality is filled with small print. Blood compatibility isn't just about A, B, AB, and O. It isn't even just about positive and negative. Human red blood cells carry dozens of antigen systems. Kel, Duffy, Kid, MNS, and others with names that sound like obscure characters from a forgotten novel. What made O-negative famous is that on the two biggest and most dangerous systems, the ABO group and the RHD factor, it's stripped down to the bare minimum. To most immune systems, O-negative looks like the least threatening stranger in the room. So in emergencies, when there isn't time to figure out exactly who you are in the language of blood, doctors reach for the least suspicious option. Still, when seconds matter, O-negative saves lives over and over again. Which is why the people who carry that blood type, always Rh-negative, often O-negative, quietly shoulder a special kind of medical responsibility. There's a problem. There's never enough of it. Rh-negative blood types make up a small minority globally. In some populations, fewer than 5% of people are Rh-negative. Yet those are the units hospitals need to stock, not just for emergencies, but for every Rh-negative patient who comes through the door. This creates a quiet, constant tension in hospital blood banks. They track their Rh-negative inventory like a slow-burning fuse. Beyond donation, Rh-negative individuals can volunteer for medical research studies, genetic sequencing projects, immunology trials, population health surveys. When scientists design studies about blood types and disease risk, they need enough Rh-negative participants to draw meaningful conclusions. Without them, the data is forever lopsided. Where this leaves us. So where does all this leave us? After a century of blood typing, decades of genetics, thousands of papers, and millions of donated samples, what do we actually know about Rh-negative blood? Let's start with the part that isn't a mystery at all. Rh-negative blood is not alien. It is not proof of secret royal hybrids, underground civilizations, or visitors from the Pleiades. Genetically, we can see exactly what it is, a missing protein on the surface of red blood cells. A deletion, a disruption, a genetic edit in the RHD gene. But that blunt technical description hides a deeper question. Yes, we know what it is. We still don't fully know why it spread the way it did, or why it's clustered so strangely in certain populations. Why do some isolated groups in Europe show Rh-negative frequencies above 30 or even 35%, while vast regions of Asia and Africa barely register a few percent? We have good theories. Maybe it's random genetic drift magnified in small ancient communities. Maybe some past disease, long gone and forgotten, once made Rh-negative carriers slightly more likely to survive. But the key word is maybe. And that's where the limits of our tools begin to show. We're still staring through fog. We can see that certain Rh-negative lineages cluster in some regions. We can infer that some versions likely arose independently more than once. But we can't yet scroll backwards through time and watch the very first Rh-negative child being born somewhere in prehistory to parents who had no idea that their baby's blood carried a tiny difference that would echo into modern conspiracy theories. We still don't know the full set of consequences that come along with being Rh-negative. For years, people have collected anecdotes. So far, large-scale studies suggest that aside from pregnancy issues and transfusion compatibility, Rh status doesn't radically alter health outcomes for most people, at least not in ways that are huge and obvious. But science thrives on large numbers, and Rh-negative is rare. So we're left with a mix of solid facts and unexplored shadows. And that's exactly the space where human imagination wakes up. Being intellectually honest means holding both at once. It means we can say, yes, it is genuinely strange that a blood factor that can make pregnancy so dangerous wasn't immediately wiped out by natural selection. Yes, it is genuinely interesting that Rh-negative frequencies form sharp geographic patterns, especially in regions like the Basque country where genetic histories are already unusual. And at the same time, we can say, no, we do not have solid evidence that Rh-negative people are more likely to have psychic abilities, secret powers, or cosmic destinies. Conclusion. So now here you are, lying in the dark, breathing slowly, listening to a story that began long before there were nations or cities or even names. A story written in something you carry with you every second of your life, your blood. We've wandered from ancient bottlenecks and vanished cousins to strange antigens and silent pregnancies. From queens with blue blood to lab technicians staring in confusion at test tubes that refuse to behave. All of it flowing through one simple question: what does it mean to have a blood type that almost shouldn't exist? And yet the real twist is this: Rh-negative might feel rare, mysterious, special. But underneath all those labels, it's still part of the same crimson river that runs through everyone. Whether your blood is Rh positive, Rh negative, AB or O, it's all a different pattern on the same tapestry. Your heart doesn't care about internet theories. It just keeps pumping. Every beat is an echo of those first small bands huddled around fires, sharing stories under unfamiliar stars. Some mysteries are out there in the universe, written in distant galaxies and collapsing stars. But some of the deepest ones are much closer, inside your veins. When this ends, you might forget the name of a particular antigen, or how the Rh factor was first discovered. But maybe you'll remember this: your body is full of unsolved puzzles, small everyday miracles that scientists are still trying to understand. If tonight's journey kept your mind gently wandering while you drift towards sleep, you can support this in a few simple ways. You can tap the like button. You can subscribe if you'd like to keep exploring hidden chapters of history, science, and myth while you rest. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Leave a comment with your country, your city, or just listening from bed, and your time zone. For now, you don't have to do anything.